It didn't start pretty, but it also didn't need to. Houston wins by 40 points on Milos Uzan's big day. And the question becomes, are they back? I think so.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the post-game, first listen the next morning, or anywhere in between. We're breaking down Houston just beating Colorado 102-62, and was a fun Saturday brunch contest of sorts. Today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at Mazda. We got more on that fun later. Look, this was a fun game for a lot of reasons. It did not start that way, but Milos Uzan gets the Cougs going. That's going to be the first segment. The bench mob, the impact of that in the second, if not before that. And then we'll also talk some more about other things this team might need now that we have bounced back from the losing streak. And that's really, I think, where things start here. Houston had lost 3 games in a row in the last 9 days for the first losing streak of 3 games or more since 2017. Think back at the World in 2017, things have changed a lot. And Houston has not lost many games, and hadn't lost many more than 3 games in a season, whole lot since then, much less 3 in a row. But Houston has found a way to respond now with a 102-62 win, and it looked like they were sleepwalking out the gate. Houston fell behind. It was 11-3 early. It was 16-11 before Houston really turned things on. And I want to give credit here, and this is where we start the Milos Uzan conversation. He played 32 minutes. He had 26 points on just 13 shots, 9 of 13 shooting, 5 of 7 behind the arc. Also had 6 assists and 0 turnovers. Really tremendous game from him. He looked like the Big 12 dominant player he was a year ago. And really, I think in part, this was you're going to see people talk about the guard, Isaiah Johnson, who had a good game. I shouldn't poo-poo that too much. Isaiah Johnson's listed at about 6'1". He had 19 points of his own as the other guard for Colorado. The deal here was Johnson was not going to be able to guard Milos, and they didn't really have a lot of other options. The Barrington Hargress is also a 6 foot or under guy. Milos has him beat on size. The other big, stockier guys they've got could not stay in front of him. Milos had his way, and it was interesting because he did it both as a lead point guard, like we're used to seeing him score, but I thought he did a much better job on Saturday playing as the off guard role. There were several moments where Kingston Flemings, who we should point out had his own 11 points and 8 assists kind of day, was able to get in the paint and spit the ball out, and Uzan seemed to be in movement, in rhythm, in much more amenable or open or conceivably scorable spots. And I think part of that obviously is you're not playing in the opponent. You're not playing Kansas, Arizona, Iowa State. Sure. You're also, I think at this point, you're getting to the end of February, guys are learning roles, and Milos has found that after some harsh criticism, I'm sure, in film. And then we also found out throughout the week that after having grown this season together and having moments where I felt like Milos might be back against the Cincinnatis of the world or whatever, you then found out that he was so hurt going into the Kansas game that Sampson was surprised he was suiting up to play. It was a game time decision. And so he comes out and plays tremendously today on Saturday. And he did it, I thought, from a really aggressive standpoint, really, really early, attacking downhill, getting in the lane, kind of putting bigs in conflict, whether it was Doc or whomever, and really making it. He was able to take advantage, felt like, of those kind of things. Look, I was really thoroughly impressed by Milos. I think Houston needs, obviously, it'd be great to get 26 points a day out of Milos. That's like pie in the sky, right? But I think Houston does need an aggressive look to score Milos more often than not. It opens up a lot of his game and opens up a lot of their game, especially with whatever Emanuel Sharp is dealing with on that hip that we heard about last week. He also is being tabbed to cover the other team's most challenging cover as far as the guards go. So it's using a lot of his energy. You're not necessarily getting the scoring lift out of him you did for the first 2 or 3 months of the season because of where other things are going. Now, he was 2 of 5 from behind the arc, 2 of 7 overall from the field. Could you see that easily turn into a 3 of 5 and a crazy good day? Or maybe he goes, 4 of 7 or something. Sure, Emanuel Sharp, that is. But Milos being able to pick up the scoring by being more aggressive and intentional would cover a lot of the gaps we've seen in the last couple of games before this. I also think it was important for the big picture of this team that it came with so many moments of him being the off the ball kind of guy, right? Where Kingston is still initiating around the offense, but when it gets to be Milos' turn, he can then look to really score. Now, he had 6 assists. He was able to put bigs in conflict and also hit the drop-offs and also hit the other things as well. But I really think that the aggression, 9 of 13 shooting is an incredibly efficient day, obviously, and 5 of 7, so 7 of those 13 were threes. He was 5 of 7 behind the arc. But that also implies really consistently good shots, right? You don't just go 9 of 13 jacking up turnarounds from the corner, right? Like these are impressive shots and shot selections that comes from being aggressive, getting downhill, using the floater, right? And all of that. I do think too that this may be, or we're talking about the evolution of Milos, some of Kingston's game as well. Kingston took just 5 shots, and I think we've gotten used to. Kingston has set the freshman scoring record at Houston. I would point out that he set the freshman scoring record at Houston. It would need over 20 a game and to play 40 games a year to break the all-time scoring record at Houston set by Elvin. But that's a separate conversation. The freshman scoring record, though, is impressive. We're used to Kingston scoring more, being more aggressive in shooting. And I thought he picked spots a little bit better today. And I think the layperson watched it and thought it was more passive because he wasn't necessarily getting into the lane to score or rising up from mid-ranges over outstretched defenders. It looked like a growth moment out of him too, where he got to 15 foot and he could raise up and pull up a mid-range. He's got a good mid-range pull-up. It's not out of his wheelhouse, but it did feel like you saw a more decisive or looking to get others involved kind of a day out of at a Kingston. And so you saw that play out as well with a lot more shot attempts from Milos. Not to mention that when Chase McCarty came in, he got 5 shots up. Mercy Miller got 5 shots up. And those guys on the bench played a really key role in this as well. But how they played with Kingston and Milos, I think, is that they hit the open shots and took advantage of the open opportunities given by took advantage of the attention, I guess I should say. The gravity is what I hate throwing that word, but the attention that Kingston and Milos necessitated. Now, this is a 40-point win over a Colorado team that drops to 16 and 13 overall. It's not like you beat some world-beating sort of team. But I would point out, I don't know if he'll stay at Colorado or transfer out, but that Isaiah Johnson kid's probably going to get a shot at the league someday. That Hargress kid's been averaging 14 or 15 points and 5 assists a game. You held him to just 6. You turned that team over 15 times. You had a pretty strong showing, even given the opponent. And I think that starts with the aggression after an ugly first couple of minutes that Milos kind of inflicted on this game. Now, still got a big week ahead of us, and then obviously March Madness starts. I guess March technically starts tomorrow if we're getting really detailed about it. But I think the bench rotation we saw on Saturday is going to be a big part of how that works out for Houston, how that goes for Houston. And it kind of feels like we're starting to get some answers as far as who that solidified bench rotation on such a young team is. But before we get that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Because workplace chaos, finding someone for the job, whether that's someone off your bench or whatever, deadlines stack up, inboxes overflow. One position you have to fill is still sitting open. When pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Now, Indeed Sponsored Jobs can help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, that skills, experience, location, not just hoping the right candidate just comes across your post at random. Here's the stats. Is it all in the minute we've been talking? You and I, companies like yours have made 27 different hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data available worldwide. So if you're hiring, you can spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who will check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. You need the right person to cut through the chaos. Job for Indeed sponsored job. You get $75 off a sponsored job credit. Put your job on the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Parker Ainsworth locked on Cougs. Looking at Houston's big 40-point win over Colorado, obviously headlined by the 26-point outing from Milos Uzan, his highest for the season. I think you've had other guys. Obviously, you had the Kingston 40 points and stuff like that, but big night out of Milos. Good to have those kinds of things happen. But I think the other storyline you're starting to see unfold is Houston is looking at a real trio of bench players making impacts. We at some point this season had criticisms of what frankly each of these guys was doing, whether it was Khalifa Sakho as the bench big man or Chase McCarty as kind of a swing or Mercy Miller coming in as a guard. And each of them has had moments where frankly it's like, oh, is it really their turn? It also looks like as we're getting towards and now we just wrapped up February and heading into March, I guess not towards, you're looking at guys that have kind of grown into roles. Mercy Miller is a true sophomore. Chase McCarty is a redshirt freshman. And Khalifa Sakho is a veteran, but it's his first year playing at Houston after time at Utah State and Sam Houston State. That's also a big step up in competition, and he's playing a lot bigger role. I mean, Sakho himself played 15 minutes. McCarty played 23 minutes. Mercy Miller played 23 minutes. Each of those guys, I guess, or we should point out, McCarty and Miller both played more minutes than two starters. And I think that's speaks to foul trouble and Tugler and Tanak, which will come up in the third segment, I'm sure. But also, I think, speaks to the impact those guys had. And what I loved of Mercy Miller's impact specifically in this game, each of these guys gets a shout out, so I don't feel like I'm leaving anyone out. Mercy Miller had 10 points. But for a majority of his 20, he got like 5 of those 10 in the final couple minutes there. For the majority of his time, he was earning a role in impacting winning without scoring, which for a 4-star recruit, highly touted recruit coming in that he was, he had 60 points in a game in high school. He has been known as a guy to come in and kind of get some instant offense because he is a bucket. He clearly has found other ways to get involved and win the game. An impact winning. He had 8 rebounds. 6'4", Mercy Miller had 8 rebounds in 23 minutes. He was diving on the floor. He was picking up guys in rotation. He was correctly tagging off of guys when pick and roll coverages were happening. He was just always in the right spots. And that's that kind of growth we've been looking for at him. And frankly, it was the kind of things we were hearing about when he was not seeing the floor as much. People were like, but he can score, he can score, he can score. And everyone inside the program was like, yeah, but we need him to make sure he is giving up less points than he's scoring. And he emphatically did those kinds of things. Really, for the last couple of games, I thought he had one of the better games against Kansas for Houston last week. But today, Saturday, he really put all of that on display. They kept showing the highlight where he ends up, covering 2 guys at one time, whatever. They showed that 3 or 4 times on the broadcast. I really like what we saw out of him on Saturday. I also think that Chase McCarty showing a guy that dude just finds ways to win. I know on social media, he plays pickleball and other kind of fun athletic endeavors and outings. And maybe he's just a winner in all those as well. It feels though, he's found a role as a winner in this. He had his own 4 rebounds, but his big deal to me were how many of them, they don't count as rebounds, and the staff keeps track of them. So I know someone on staff knows, but all of his tip outs, all of the hustle plays, the plays where he doesn't get a rebound, but he is so aggressively flying for the ball that Colorado has to foul him just because they're not ready for the intent, and that ends up getting Houston the ball anyway. McCarty did so much of that kind of stuff and played 3 different positions in this game. McCarty is kind of a flexible wing. He's listed at 6'6". He's listed about 220. If you told me he was 6'7", I'd believe you. If you told me he was 6'5", I'd believe you. He's just a big, long, strong wing guy that plays an undersized 4 at times for this team, and so much so that even when he was out there, sometimes you play an undersized 4, you go 4 out, 1 in, and that 4 is not really a whole lot different on offense than your 3 is, so whatever, right? They put McCarty at the 4 and ran horn sets like you do when you have twin towers or Chris Sinak and JoJo Tugler in there. And I really thought that all of those kinds of things were good for this team. You know, to do so many different things to them on the floor were good for this team. And obviously, speaking of being good for this team, Khalifa Sakho, 15 minutes, I believe a season high 9 points and an assist. He had 4 rebounds. Sakho's role has proven so important because of the limitations around JoJo Tugler. Tugler had 2 fouls in the first less than 2.5 minutes of this game. Story we've all heard before at this point, and we'll belabor the problems of this game later. I don't mean to be a beatdown right now, but that was not great. Sakho's ability to come in and still maintain a high level of intense, dirty work, high motor, that kind of stuff has proven very important for this team. That I mean, said anyone can defend like JoJo Tugler when JoJo Tugler is defending right. I do think it's worth pointing out though that they're finding ways to manufacture good defense when he's not in the game, whether that's moments with Chris Sinak at the 5 or Khalifa Sakho at the 5. Sliding over Sinak from a starter 4 to a starting 5 is not as challenging to me as finding a true bench big. And we talked, was it back against Tech? It might have been back against the Tech loss, the one up in Lubbock in the snowstorm, where it kind of felt like last year's team, the under discussed thing was they kind of had 3 starting bigs and Juwan Roberts, JoJo Tugler, and Javier Francis off the bench, who actually started the first few games of last season, right? Now it was kind of like, okay, and maybe that was back in January, like, okay, who's that going to be? Because you need some Sinak, you need some JoJo, you need some Sakho. Is that trio really going to be able to help? I mean, you can't replace Juwan Roberts one-on-one, but in the aggregate, can this trio replace that trio, especially with the linchpin of both being JoJo Tugler? And I don't think in January we could have said that. I still, obviously, Colorado is not your Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Iowa State, but I do think you're seeing, whether it's this game or I thought he played better against Kansas and Arizona maybe than he had in the weeks prior. I think you're seeing movements towards that out of Sinak and Sakho, which leaves us to JoJo Tugler, which people are commenting in the comments here about not starting JoJo Tugler, or maybe you move on or whatever. And it's this double-edged sword of like, he came back in with 2 fouls in the first half and kind of bled points at one point because he was not trying to be aggressive and pick up that 3rd foul. And the frustrating thing is, look, everyone that covers this team talks to various coaches and does this. I'm not trying to like act like holier than thou or more special or whatever, but it is interesting in that it does feel like there's these moments where they have harped on like picking your spots or where to be physical, because you get a bad call or an aggressive foul on the very like first defensive possession of the game on an and 1 to the big fellow coming across the lane. It's like, okay, that's not great. But then less than 2 minutes later, you can't be like overextending yourself on like, let the rebound go out of bounds or let the guy catch the rebound and play defense. And the aggression that makes, like, I don't ever want JoJo Tugler to have no fouls, because that would imply he's not playing the kind of basketball we need him to. It's about picking the spots to exert yourself beyond that normal means. And we're still visibly, as we wrap up February, still having problems with that. I think Sakho has made an impact that helps cover that up some. I think just McCarty has made an impact that helps cover that up some. I think this bench group is really solidified. And I intentionally, I think that means the rotation of those trio is 2. Ramon Walker did not suit up on Saturday. It sounded like there was an ankle sprain this week at practice. Unclear if it was practice or working out. It doesn't really matter. It's just an ankle sprain. It'll be okay. It's not like a grade 3 out for a month kind of thing. It doesn't sound like. Intends to dress out for and play in the senior night game on against Baylor this week. But it does feel like the bench mob would be great. It would also be great to get 24 minutes out of JoJo Tugler. He played 19 today, so it's not like he's so far off. He finished with just 3 fouls. So after that initial barrage, he cooled it down a little bit. But you can't have him sitting 13 minutes of the first half or 10 minutes of the first half against highly competitive teams later in the season. And I just can't. Just can't with that. Now I want to talk about some other things this team needs. I actually like a question that just got thrown in the chat here, so keep those kind of things going as well. I want to talk more about where, after beating Colorado by 40 points, where you look to go next as the Houston Cougars. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda, because Mazda moves the game forward and is there for the folks that move the game forward and look beyond what is on the screen as well. Moments like, honestly, I want to talk about Milos Uzan getting down low and getting in the paint, getting threes and this and that and whatever. But truthfully, there was a moment where he got in the lane. You had a back-cutting Chris Sakho who catches a nice little drop-off and turns into a quick dunk. The work that Sakho has done on the back end of things, where you're not seeing it, you're seeing it at practice, not in games, is starting to translate. He's had a really good last month. And there were moments in those first couple months of the season where it was like, can he handle his physicality? And now that question seems to be no more. That detail, that fire, that grit that never quit, that's all been really, really obvious in Sakh's last month. Now, same way that they put passion to every model at Mazda, highlights make the real, but what it takes to get there is what really counts. More to Mazda because there's more to you. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, because if you've ever wanted to go to the NBA Finals live and in person, this is your chance. FanDuel is giving you a chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes, and here's how it works. Turn your profit boost and use them during an NBA future. You'll be automatically entered to win a shot at the NBA Finals for 2. Yes, that's the trip, the flights, the tickets, the entire experience. If you're looking forward and thinking about, I think this team can make a run, or I think this thing will happen, go use your future right now. If you use your profit boost on that future, you are automatically entered. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Your profit boost on an NBA future. Get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Park Rangers locked on Cougs here. And Houston beats Colorado by 40 points. And I like beating Colorado for other reasons. I like winning by 40 points for lots of obvious reasons. But if we're being honest, 16-13 Colorado, or what are they even, the Big 12? They're at the bottom of the league. Tad Boyle got tossed. I don't know if he makes the flight home. I really, really, really look at, like, well, what do you take out of this game after beating a team like you were supposed to? And for one thing, I had points throughout the year. I've talked about comparing this year's team to last year's team and what isn't fair. This year's team has this gigantic level of variance. The lows are low and the highs are high. And while last year's team had this much higher floor than the present iteration of the Houston Cougars, and I think that was a key factor in them getting so far, getting the national championship game and all that, right? Last year's team didn't beat a whole lot of conference opponents by 40. There were a couple, but it just didn't happen all the time. Last year's team beat a Colorado team by 12. Like it was closer than it should have been, right? And I think that what you're seeing here is how this team gets things clicking. 7 players in double figures, spreading the basketball around. Make sure I got my number right here. 20 assists and just 7 total turnovers, and those 7 turnovers, 2 of them come kind of in garbage time at the end, one, right? So anyway, I guess probably one of the assists does too. But the truth here is that this team with 2 point guards plays a little bit higher speed and higher pace than we're used to. We're going from 350th in pace in college basketball to like 300th in pace in college basketball. I'm not saying that we're playing, up and down. We're not UNLV from many years ago and all that kind of stuff, but it is a faster pace, and that has taken, some different turns, angles, getting used to things, etc. It's taken Milos Uzan, I think, time to get adjusted. I think it's taken Kingston Flemings times to, as the guy kind of steering that pace, times get adjusted to high major Division One, Big 12 college basketball. And there's been moments where like the wear and tear and the grind of that has looked more challenging than the games themselves, right? They played 3 games in 9 days, had 5 days off before playing this one. I don't think there's any magic to that part of this. But with looking at what they take with them, what they move forward, that bench group's going to be important. How those trio of guys play is going to be important. And I look to whether it's the likelihood of seeding in the conference tournament, which we talked some about last week. We'll talk about again in a second. If you're in a semifinal game or a final game of the Big 12 conference tournament, or if you're in a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 game or whatever in the NCAA tournament, or wherever you are, functionally, unfortunately, there will probably be a game where you have to tab into that 9th guy, Ramon Walker, Isaiah Harwell, for a few minutes because of foul trouble here, rolled ankle there, blood on the jersey here. Like something's going to happen. And can you fall back to that guy? I wonder if taking so long to eventually settle into who this trio is, Harwell has played minutes in big games. Ramon Walker has played minutes in this role in big games, right? Do you feel more like you're kind of finding those kinds of spots? And then, frankly, along the way here and making Mercy and Chase and Khalifa earn this spot that they're in now, I also think you've probably helped develop those guys in a lot of ways. I also think, as I said in the bench mob segment, I'll say it again, those 3 guys are in their first year of real minutes. Yes, Mercy Miller was a freshman last year, played a few minutes here and there, but this is a very different kind of role. McCarty is a redshirt freshman, and Khalifa Sakho, for all his time in college basketball, as I mentioned earlier, is in his first year as a Houston Cougar. That those guys are coming into their own right now, I think makes a lot of sense. Chris Nack, we kind of seen do a little bit earlier in the season, but he also playing more minutes, kind of grew into himself over the course of the year. And now we're kind of seeing roles get solidified. Emanuel Sharp, for all his bumps and bangs and bruises and whatever, is also having to figure out how to be a effective offensive player. He went 2 of 5 from behind the arc, which 40%, not bad. And also he's covering Isaiah Johnson for large stretches of this game, who is the best player at Colorado, right? And that is a different role than he had a year ago. Point blank. It just is. And he's adjusting, I think, as we see before our eyes, where he's maybe having to hone in more on that defense. There were also parts here earlier in the year where they tried Milos out as that defensive guy, and how much that took away from the offense, I think, was kind of weighing on this team, right? And Milos is a great shooter, but he's maybe not the same catch and shoot shooter with tired legs that Emanuel is when you've been playing defense like that. And so maybe it's more important to get him going downhill and all those things. Their roles are shifting and changing, and that's awesome. What this team needs is they need Tugler to continue to get cleaner, and that didn't start well today. It ended fine. It did not start well on Saturday. Obviously, they need to, knock on wood, continue to ask for good health. But I think, truthfully, now that they're seeing the balance of roles, they're still going to need some way to create easy baskets. I think the common critique from last year's group was, or from this year's group compared to last year's group, was that easy basket was throwing into Juwan Roberts for the post move, right? 2 years ago, it was Jamal Shed, downhill, get out of my way. Year before that, it was Marcus Sasser, side-to-side ISOs. We've seen it be Fabian, we've seen it be Quentin, we've seen it be Rob. Now, it's how do we balance this team speedier basketball where you got all these guys contributing. Flemings had 8 assists, so he still obviously did that. I think the easiest baskets, though, come from finding him in mismatches. And so how do you balance, can you get to close to double-doubles kind of stuff where you get, he had 11 and 8 today, 40-point win, scored 100 points. In a 70-point game, more grinded out game, can you still get him to 15 and 8 or 15 and 7 and from a production space, right? Because today there were times they got in the lane, they froze the center. And when I say they froze the center, they really are getting in the lane, pulling the guy up and dropping things off right pretty quickly. And I thought it was tremendous how maybe it'll be an Everyday Club film study where when they got in the lane, whether it was Doc or whoever the big at the time was for Colorado, would freeze and help side. And someone was always cutting. It was McCarty backside, Sanak backside, Sakho. Someone was always cutting where the freeze of the big man meant that there was someone open at the rim. And part of that's playing a worse opponent, but part of that's also, I think, using Kingston and Emanuel, and I guess really Kingston and Milos most effectively. We're breaking that down and more going into Monday. We also have NFL combine stuff for a couple Houston Cougars going very well. Latrell McCutcheon and tremendous. That guy made some money in Indianapolis, the combine. Taryn Kojiel had a pretty good Saturday as well. So we'll talk about some of that. Baylor's coming up this week, Big 12 race. There's another couple Big 12 games that impact Houston seeding in the Big 12 tournament later. Right now, Houston should be the 4, which means you get a double bye. It feels hard to believe they'd fall further back than that based on who got to play who left this season. So I'd imagine you'll actually see Houston kind of move up before they move back, and that double bye is going to prove really important. But we'll talk about that as it unfolds. So check that out and more by subscribing to get the latest in the Houston Cougars each and every day. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.